Well, what podcast number is this? I mean, you guys ought to have it down by now, right?
Well, we were batting 1,000 as soon as we got the iPad out for the
Yeah.
I think Josh is at maybe like a 70% success right now.
Well, if we're talking about this fall, I'm at a hundo.
He's trending now.
We're going for bears and deer this week in Oregon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna leave. I think Sunday. You know, tomorrow's the opener, but we're not gonna make it. We got football games for the little guys, football and soccer, and
What do you like to do with bear meat personally? What's your favorite?
honestly, man, it makes great burger. I love the burger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My buddy Nick does the same thing.
Does he?
Loves the burger. Yeah, he shot 2 back-to-back over the water last year.
Oh,
10
did he?
minutes apart.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, a lot of chocolate ones down where we go. If we can fill our bear tags, I'll buy us a couple more and we'll try to get some more. Oregon's kind of screwy with their tag sales. You have to buy all your tags. This goes for all big game animals. You have to purchase them before the opening day of the season. Yeah. But as long as you've purchased one bear tag, you're allowed to purchase your second one after season opens. But if you didn't purchase your first tag, you can't purchase one at all once the season starts. I think there is a special rule there, though, that you can go in to a department office and still get one after the season starts. But I think they do that to try to cut down on people like
shoot an animal.
yeah, and then go buy the tag. Yeah,
I don't disagree with that.
yeah. I really want to shoot the bow down there because
You just got an expandable for bear?
No, I am going to shoot the other grizzly stick broadhead though that I bought. I think it's called the Maasai. It's just a little bit different shape. They take that 3-to-1 concept and they concave the front end of that broadhead a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting shape.
Yeah, I think there's a world of opportunities in broadheads, really.
Oh yeah,
Like drastic amounts. Did you watch that the Schwacker video that Levi Morgan did?
no.
It was like 45 minutes long, and they tested a bunch of different veins and a bunch of different broadheads. And the claim to fame of the Schwacker was that the design of it, because the blades are forward before the opener.
Right.
So the broadhead goes in and then opens.
Oh really?
Yeah, so you don't have an entrance hole, or you have a pinhole entrance hole,
right.
but you're also not cutting through the hide,
Yeah.
and you're not cutting through the ribs.
Yeah, that's an
If
interesting.
you do it right
concept.
with a 2-inch cut, so you get inside and then it opens up, and then you're
Right.
cutting 2 inches through the vitals. It seems like wicked smart to me,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure, how effective that is. You got me all nervous since you're so fizzed out here.
The only
Johnny on the spot.
The only downside I can think
be ready
to
to
that
hit it.
concept is possible
No.
not great blood trails, if
Yeah.
you don't get an exit wound.
Yeah, which you shoot pop. You shoot.
They're already premature popped.
Yeah, you shoot a 1,000-pound animal. There's a good possibility you're not going out the backside.
Yeah.
And what's your blood trail look like? But if you put a 2-inch hole in something, how far is it going anyway?
Right.
And I think that's always been the argument for the mechanical broadheads. It's
Yeah.
such a drastic hole that your animal's going to die. I mean, you're going to shoot in the guts and it's going to die.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily disagree with that. So that's got me really intrigued.
Yeah, if you make a good shot, it's not going far in most cases.
You put it in the right spot at the right angle, it's done like dinner. Fork to table.
I like it. Yeah, the design is super interesting. I hadn't thought twice about Schwacker until I saw that it did.
I didn't know it
did
did
go
that.
in without expansion.
Yeah, I feel like a dipshit that I never. And you can take one look at it and go, "Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense."
Yeah, that's
I just
cool.
didn't know that. You want to throw those in there, Tim? I think she's going good.
What you drinking over there, home skillet?
Americano
Oh, really?
No cold brew this time.
from our local shop.
It looks a little
It's got a little almond milk in it.
it looks a little pale.
So
It's a little iced up.
pressed blah water with sugar, huh?
No, it's not sugar.
Almond milk. I haven't seen one that doesn't have
Very little.
It's okay.
Yeah, almond milk,
Well.
very little.
Almond milk
You
blows.
can get them with more,
I probably would prop it.
get that crackle.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know if I'd shut her just yet.
Yeah,
That
but
needs
you're on
to
the other side of
catch.
the fire, so you ain't got to worry about it.
That's right. Just like I got to watch the red little button that you wish you could see.
I do wish I could see that.
Well, why did we do it this way? Why didn't we set it up the other way
I don't
originally?
know.
Because we're
I don't
dumb.
know. Here we are. Yeah, that's true.
We are dumb. The one thing you wish you could see, and the one thing I wish I could see, neither of us could watch where we're at.
Hey.
Maybe it's fun. It makes we're twitchy,
Such is life.
right? That's probably gotta be it. There you go. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. So why'd you want to have Drew on the podcast today?
Yeah, we got our friend Drew back on the pod. Hi, Drew.
What up?
How's your pickleball game?
It depends on who I'm playing.
It's not as good as your elk hunting game. Drew had a really sweet elk season thus far. We're still in the middle of it.
I don't know that I would consider this a sweet season. Like, it has obviously a bright spot in it, but man, it was a tough season, and I think a lot of elk hunters would echo those sentiments.
Oh, close the door. Other way.
I didn't hear of a whole lot of
Pull that back open.
great action from a lot of guys that I talked to. But yeah, it was a grind.
I heard some very positive stories, but I would say it was maybe 10%.
Yeah.
And like 90%, it was a very, very difficult year.
Some of the local upper Idaho guys I know got into some good days, but yeah, I've definitely heard some more of the southern guys being like, "Hey, that we never got into a lot of great rut days,"
Yeah.
and it seems like the trend is that the rut just keeps getting it's trending later. It seems.
I don't know. Yeah, I hear a lot of guys say that, but I don't know if I buy into that concept yet. It's possible.
What do you think's going on?
I think it was a multitude of things. A lot of us were expecting to maybe not see as many good bulls in certain areas this year because of the early snowfall last year brought a lot of elk down, and a lot of elk got whacked in rifle season last year in a lot of areas in Montana anyways. So a lot of us were not expecting to see as many mature bulls, but as far as the rut action goes, yeah, I think a lot of us were surprised by the lack of a rut this year in some spots. I mean, all my favorite spots were pretty dead, seemed like, as far as the rutting goes. The elk were there, but they were just a lot harder to come by.
Are you going to get in any more archery days this year? Do you know?
Not for elk, no.
So that chapter's closed, huh?
Yep.
Archery out.
Yep.
2023.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Drew shot a great bull. So let's just dive right into the hunt. Yeah.
Well,
This will be my first time actually hearing the story, too, because I
okay,
haven't heard
good.
it.
And
so I'm excited.
This fall, I kind of want to do as many tagged out podcasts as we can with our local friends or maybe friends of the area. So if you're someone who's local and has a cool hunting story they want to share, you can send Josh or I a message on Instagram.
Sure.
Yeah, do more tagged out podcasts and just get to know the people around us and tell hunting stories. I think hunting stories are an important part of our culture, really.
yeah,
They're fun to share.
yeah, for
So,
sure.
yeah. So start us off from the beginning. Yeah.
Well,
Do you want to start with the GPS coordinates? Or
no, those are top secret. Tim knows that.
Yeah.
So you're hunting in eastern Russia. Good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Idaho.
Yeah.
I pulled into the trailhead at like 1 a.m. and I was pretty stoked to see that I was the only guy there.
And what's your history with the spot?
I hunted this spot last year and obviously wanted to go back because it was pretty good, I thought. But I'd say, hunting pressure there was moderate to moderate heavy, but it didn't seem like anything crazy. So I was pretty excited to go back to this spot. And,
What were your dates last year? Do you remember?
Oh, gosh. I think I
was
I
middle of
rolled in there
September, wasn't
last
it?
year about the 8th or 9th
Yeah.
and hunted through the 16th is when I tagged out
Yeah.
in Idaho there. And then, but yeah, so anyways, rolled into the trailhead 1 a.m. and I wanted to get in and be ready to glass for the morning. So I just packed up and hiked in the dark. Kind of ran out of gas before light and didn't get to where I wanted to be. But got up there later in the morning, like 8 a.m., and was surprised to see, man, I still glassed up some elk. Not out in the wide open feeding, but, kind of in some transition areas.
Did you anticipate, were you going in to stay, or was this like a day
Yeah,
hunt
no,
spot?
I went in with like 4 days of food. I wasn't going to go back to the truck. I was just going to keep hitting basins till I found elk.
Just little light camping setup or something?
Yeah, yep. I always do just super lightweight, single man tent, freeze dried food this year. In years past, I've ixnayed the stove and just taken like all dried food and eat cold meals. But I got into those Harvest Right freeze dryers and made all my own meals. So
Yeah, you whipped up all of your own meals, which
Yeah.
we'll get into. I think that's pretty cool.
yeah,
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that because I'm intrigued.
yeah.
How far are your elk typically traveling from their feeding area?
In this spot, not that far at all. They're basically hopping over a ridge and feeding on the south side of a ridge and some kind of open sage grass stuff. But yeah, so anyways, glassed up a good herd with a good bull. It's possible that this was even the bull that I ended up shooting. I told you that, I think, but it's hard to know for sure. But similar looking bull, and put them to bed and made a plan to get in close to the afternoon. And it started raining. Made it down in there, got within about 200 yards, and they just weren't in a spot where you could get in close. So I just hung around that 150, 200 yard zone and hoped that they would kind of move into a place where I could make a play. Mm-hmm. That didn't really happen.
Were you able to glass them right in their bed, or just an educated guess on where they were?
No, I could keep eyes on a few of them, here and there. They'd pop into a spot where I could see them. And then he would bugle occasionally, so I knew right where they were at. And then as the evening came and it started getting dark out, the rain just hit hard. And I knew rain was coming, but I didn't know how drastic it would be. By the time I got back to my tent, which was like a 2-mile hike, I was soaked completely from head to toe. And it poured through the night, all the next day. And pretty much didn't get any hunting done. Was that a Monday or something? But the rains finally slowed down enough to get out and do some glassing that evening. And it ended up raining like 1.25 inches.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah,
That's
dude,
a shitload.
it was
There's some sketchy places down that area where rain makes
oh, dude, yeah, it's
the
terrible.
ability to travel frightening.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Gumbo?
basically kind of hunkered down through that rain, got out that evening, and I didn't see them, but I heard them. They were in the same place. So I just kind of glassed till dark and made a plan for the morning.
Were you making any calls at this point?
No, so I never like to call too much, but I always have them there. But on this trip, in my rush to get on the trail in the middle of the night, totally left all my calls in the truck.
And did you panic when you realized you didn't have them, or were you just like, no, I'll
I was
just
just
hunt
like,
without 'em?
fuck it. It's 6 miles back to the truck, so I could have wasted the middle part of a day and gone back and got them. But I was like, let's just see what I can do back here for a few days without the calls. Might not need them. So the next morning, I wanted to figure out where they were feeding exactly, and then be able to set up in a transition for that evening, because the brush there is super, super thick. You're not going to stalk in where they're bedding. It's just not going to happen. So I get around that morning, and I find where they're feeding, super fresh sign in there. And I had waited till later in the morning to do this, to give them plenty of time to get back in their bedding area. And I don't know if it was just because all the rain we had, but they had staged up literally maybe 60 yards in the timber, and I had no idea. And my wind got right to them, and they just blew out of nowhere. This is like 9 a.m, and I was blown away that they were right there on the edge of the timber. And I was fucking pissed, dude. I was like, great,
I Other way.
That's how you start out the season, right? And I watched him head off into the next basin, and so I circled my way around, wanted to find out if there was more elk in this drainage or if that was the only herd. And I found out the hard way that there was more elk in there, and I blew all those elk out too. Similar circumstances. They were just bulls all over the place, but they were all right on the edge of the timber. And as I circled that basin on the ridge line, I just kept blowing them out. And I was pretty pissed off at myself or at the situation, but I knew where most of these elk were going. They were in the next basin over, so I set up over there that evening and got myself in a spot where I could hear them if they bugled. This basin was super thick. I probably wasn't going to spot them up. But the bull I was hoping to hear that I had heard that morning earlier was he fired up that afternoon, and
You remember about what time?
yeah, this is like 5:30ish in the afternoon. And this basin kind of curves around, so I couldn't pinpoint where he was because he was deep in there. And so I started hiking up to get a better vantage point for when he bugled again. And as I was doing that, I heard a bugle way off behind me. And I couldn't tell exactly where it was, but when I whipped my head around, I was like, he's got to be over in this saddle over there that I could see. And I still was focused on this other bull, but he bugles again about 10 minutes later, and he's gotten a lot closer. And so I'm like, well, let's take a look at my map. And I'm looking at where he bugled the first time, where he bugled the second time. And then I had made this little waypoint on my GPS where I had seen all these fresh elk tracks in the bottom of this bowl. And his line of direction was like heading right there. Mm-hmm. So I was like, damn, dude, I know right where these elk are going. So I just forgot about my original plans and tried to haul ass down to this spot in hopes I would beat them there. And of course, that didn't happen. As I'm coming around a corner, I hear him bugle, and he's already down in this. It's kind of a little feeding meadow with a pond, and I could tell they were probably watering there. So I come around a corner, he bugles. They're like 250 yards out, and they're already in this spot. So I'm kind of in a jam because my wind is heading towards them. But I was on one side of the creek and they were on the other side. So I felt like as long as I stayed on my side and stayed up about 30 or 40 yards, my wind would stay on that side of the creek. And I just kept sneaking down until I saw a cow and another cow and another cow. And now I'm well inside of 100. And I'm looking around for this bull and I can't find him. And then I finally see him. He'd come up out of that water hole and he was chasing a cow. And I'm already within range. I'm probably 60 yards. I was already knocked up, and he's chasing this cow pretty hard. So I'm trying to figure out, where he's going to stop, where my shooting lanes are. I get a little closer, and at this point, there's really not a whole lot I can do because I'm out of cover. And I get a range on him at 50 yards, and I know he's going to pop into this opening. So I draw back. And he passes through it way too fast before I can even stop him. And I don't see another opening, so I let down. And then out of the corner of my eye, I see this calf who was on my side of the creek, and he winded me. And so I'm like, oh, shit, it's probably over now. And he sticks his nose up and starts trotting off. And I look at all the other cows, and none of them are paying any attention to him. So I'm like, okay, that's sweet.
Bonus.
Yeah, and he didn't bark or, do anything to alert everybody else. So now I'm refocused on the bull, and he's in a spot where I'd say like 5 more yards, and he's going to hit an opening. So I come back to full draw again, And as soon as his like neck clears the opening, I just mew with my mouth, and he gets one more step and stops and looks right at me, and he's perfect. I mean, I got his vitals wide open in that opening. And I just settled the pin and do what I do there, just slap that trigger. And it was a perfect shot. He was slightly quartering away, slightly lower than me. And I see my arrow disappear just like right behind the shoulder. And I can tell it goes all the way through. He bolts, and I can see blood coming out of him in a good spot. And I'd say he goes like 30, 40 yards and basically tips over. And I pull the binoculars up, and I can see him kind of thrashing around in the brush. So it's a done deal. I sit down, all the adrenaline hits, you know. The cows don't even know what the hell's going on. They're just like standing around looking, you know, like what just happened. So I watch them for a little bit. I probably give it 10 minutes, 15 minutes, make sure he's not moving around anymore. And then I drop down this creek up the other side, and I can't find him to save my life. The brush is so thick in there. So I end up circling downwind of him until I pick up his smell, and I just followed his smell right up to him. And he was buried. I mean, you could barely see a patch of his neck in the brush is all you could see. And you're like, man, you know, you have to track a bull 100 yards, 200 yards. You don't see him go down in this stuff. They could be a mother to find.
Oh, yeah.
But luckily, that wasn't the case. You know, it's always fun, or I don't know about fun, but it's super relieving to watch him go down.
Yeah.
You know, there's no track job necessary. Yeah.
There's no question.
It's a done deal. But
like, I have achieved my goal.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much the story. It's not like super exciting or anything, but
Well, you said you mewed at him. Hit us with that mew, dude.
meow.
What'd your blood trail look like, or did you follow it at all?
I tried to just for the shits a little bit, but about from where he died, backtracking like 10 yards, it was all over. Blood everywhere. But beyond that, from that spot to where I shot him, I couldn't find anything. And I spent very little time looking for the arrow because, A, I wanted to get some pictures and all that stuff done before dark. And B, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, you know, you hear all those horror stories of guys losing an arrow out of their quiver in the brush and they're trying to find it and it stabs them in the leg or some shit. And I was like, I don't know that I really need to look for this arrow. Chances of finding it would have been slim in that stuff anyways.
Break down your bow and arrow setup, draw length, all that shiz.
30-inch draw, I think, or 30 and a half. I can't remember. I changed it recently.
Yeah.
I'm shooting those for the first time this year. I'm shooting those Victory RIPs, not the TKOs. I used to shoot the TKOs. But I've been really happy with those, just the RIPs.
It's a good arrow.
Yeah. And I shoot the red ones because they match my bow color. Not because I'm cheap ass.
For the record, you're a little bit of a cheap ass. Come on.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But just for the record, people, those are the most crooked ones you can buy.
Yeah.
Because they're just not that crooked.
I like to say least straight.
Least straight. That sounds better, right?
Yeah. What are they, 0.006 versus 0.003?
Well, when you were building, did you have to reject any or be like, this arrow's just not that straight? Yeah,
No.
Well, you always say that rips don't get worse than 0.03, right?
I don't think Victory can make an arrow worse than 03.
Yeah.
Personally. When you go to test them, you don't find them that bad, ever. So, which is why forever I've used like red label ones to practice with and yellow label ones to hunt with.
Yeah.
I want to feel like I'm buying the most premium thing I can. I get your matchy color scheme. I get that, you know. Some people are sensitive to that. But I don't want to spare any risk, so give me the most tightest tolerance thing I can get, but there's no reason to not practice with the ones that aren't as straight. And they look different, obviously. Like you can look at a pile of arrows and go, those are the ones I practice with, those are the ones I hunt with. So it makes the most sense for me. And you're saving money on, you know, the practice ones.
So you didn't talk about your arrow weight. You didn't talk about your bow sight.
So
and your release.
Those arrows I've got tipped this year with another new broadhead that I'm trying or tried, and I'm super happy with it. Those are the Grizzly Stick, Samurais.
Samurai.
Meat Missile
Samurais.
5000s.
200 grain, and they're a true 3-to-1s with a stainless steel blade. The only thing that I don't like about them are two things. They're not one piece, but you can't have a 3-to-1 200 grain broadhead that's one piece that's made out of steel. It's not going to happen.
Correct.
So it's a aluminum ferrule, so it's a 2-piece, but I've found that they're super solid, and I haven't bent a ferrule yet, and I've shot them into some pretty tough shit. And then I'm flinging those out of a Bowtech Revolt X80, and those weigh like 575.
And your draw poundage is like twisted over 80, right?
Yeah, it's probably at about 85.
Souped
I believe.
up.
Trying to get that 95-pound hammer, dude.
Souped up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically about.
Are we compensating for anything here, buddy?
No.
No.
But because high draw weight, long draw length, your arrow's spitting out pretty quick still, right?
Oh, yeah, man.
Do you know what is chronoed at?
Though that specific arrow I haven't chronoed, but some other setups that are very similar in weight and everything, I was chronoing at like 289, 288, 287.
Still buzzing pretty good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Slow.
Yeah. But so I came up on this bull and he's buried. I spent like 30, 45 minutes just cutting brush. I had a little like backpacker's saw.
Brush saw or whatever, a little back.
Yeah. And I spent 30 minutes cutting brush out just to get pictures and have a spot where I could work on them without having just brush all around me. Mm-hmm. And I did a little anatomy check, and I hit him in a sweet spot, dude. So because of the quartering away, and I tucked behind that shoulder, I exited in front of the shoulder blade on the far side.
Yeah.
And basically took out that spot right above the heart where all the shit meets together, from the lungs, coming down from the neck, coming up from the heart. I just took that out, and so he wasn't going anywhere.
The ventricle and
Yeah, the main portal area.
yeah,
Yeah.
all that shit.
Yeah.
Well, fortunate you didn't have to go through a blade, right?
Yeah.
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 Well, I mean, I don't think that would have been a factor.
You don't think?
No, fuck no, dude. Those arrows would go through both shoulder blades.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident.
Yeah. And you accredit that to your broadhead, I would assume, right?
Yeah, and the weight of the arrow, because it's not. I mean, I could shoot the same broadhead in a 450 grain setup, and I don't think that would be near as good. But I do think the broadhead is the most important part.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe better than not near as good. But I think that there's still some benefit that's worth it to me to shoot 575 versus 475 or 500.
Yeah.
Now, talk about the bull, dude. So he's
Yeah,
thick old Idaho bull, dude. Beautiful.
Well, okay. First off, when I finally saw that bull coming up out of the water hole, you're not at a position. You're already in range. You're already knocked up. You're not confident with your wind. There's no time to sit there and be like, let's field judge this bull at 52 yards. So I take a basic look at his frame and I'm like, yep,
We'll shoot
that's
him.
a shooter. So I don't know what I'm walking up to. And the way this bull died, man, he had his nose sticking straight up in the air, and his antlers were totally underneath his body.
Oh, Jesus.
So even after I cleared some brush, I still didn't know what kind of bull I was looking at. And I couldn't budge him. His antlers were under a 4-inch log that was underneath his body, so I couldn't move the log. His antlers were totally buried in the dirt, so I literally couldn't budge him. And I kind of heaved and hoed a few times and then sat down and tried to think about what I could do. And eventually I was just like, I'm going to have to do one of those things where like, you know, a kid's stuck under a car and you just get that Superman strength.
Yeah. A little adrenaline going.
Yeah. So that's what I did, dude. And I just
have
started.
to sack up on him.
Yeah. I gave it everything I could until I finally got his antlers kind of out to the side. And then I could cut that log in 2 places and pull it out from underneath the other antler. Yeah. It was a nightmare, dude. It was a nightmare. But these are all things, you know, you've just shot a nice bull.
You don't care.
Yeah, you're not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
So after I got his rack out, and he was now laying in a place where I could work him up, I had to sit down and just rest for like 10 or 15 minutes.
Oh, I'm sure.
And then at that point, I'm sitting there looking at his rack, and I'm like, okay, this is for sure the best bull I've ever shot, but I still don't really know how big he is. I'm conservatively thinking he's probably like 330. And so I go about my business, take care of the whole animal, and then stash the rack. And I never saw it again for, a day and a half or something. And so I was excited 24 hours later when I get to go back and get my gear and the rack and see it again and then kind of really study it.
How many trips out back and forth?
So I'm kind of a fan, depending on the scenario, of shuttling, and I broke it up. Into a few different legs, and I had a total, including the rack. And I decided, because I wasn't sure how big he was, I've always had this threshold of like, if he's 350, I'll mount him, like do a shoulder mount, you know. So I decided to cape him just in case he was better than 335. And so rack, all my gear, the cape, and the meat, I had 7 trips. The 7th one was a light one. But, and that's 6 miles from the truck. 2 of it I can get to on the 4-wheeler. So 4 miles on foot, 7 trips.
You did about 30 miles.
Dude, what's the math, Tim?
It's about 30 miles. Yeah.
Yeah, so about 30 miles on foot. And that's kind of another one of my favorite little parts of elk hunting is if I can have one really great sufferfest hauling out meat every year, at least one, then I'm pretty happy. And that's just kind of a rite of passage for me. You kill a bull, and then you get to put yourself through that. That's kind of fun.
It's type 2 fun.
Yeah, type 2
Good,
fun.
good memories.
Yeah.
Yeah, fun to look back on.
Yeah. Oh, dude, the bottoms of my feet after that were just like
They're
trashed.
mangled, right? Yeah.
Yeah, totally trashed.
Brutal.
But yeah, that was pretty much the story. There was one guy that was riding horses. They weren't hunting when I got back to the trailhead, and he was pretty stoked to see the bull. And then after I got everything packed away, a grouse hunter showed up at the trailhead. But so like, I mean, I was the only guy back there elk hunting. And I know that it just had to do with the time of the season being that first week of September. Because when I was there last year, from the 8th to the 17th, there was tons of elk hunters back there. Tons of them.
Right.
Most of them back where I was were horse hunting, or all of them. I was the only guy dumb enough to hunt on foot back there. But
Yeah, a lot of stock people in that part of the state and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I like about that too is there's a decent trail system through there. So the horse hunters, they just basically ride and bugle, and anything they run into, they try to call down to the trail.
It's kind of like a glorified like truck hunting, right? Like
Yeah.
they're horse hunting, they're in deep, but they're not going to go too far off the trail.
Right.
It's kind of interesting that it's like they're
Yeah.
deep, but they're not exploring really like you can on foot.
And the country kind of is not conducive to getting off the trail, to be honest. It's just terrible, brushy, thick stuff, except for the open sage stuff, but you're not going to catch elk out there very often. So it's really a great place to hunt for my style.
Yeah. So when I talked to you on the phone, it was like, you're like, hey, dude, I shot this great bull. Told me the story. You're like, it's, I think you said like 320, 330. And at this point, you're like, I'll get you some photos. Got me some photos. And I looked at it and I was like, man, that's just a big, beautiful frame. And those are always hard for me to judge because when they look really symmetrical, they can be sneaky because that symmetry could be big or small.
Yeah.
So it's really hard unless you can compare it to something.
Yeah.
And then you finally got it home, got it rough scored, and came in about.
Yeah. So I knew I had a really nice bull when I took him into my dad's shop there where I hang all my heads, and I've got like a 340, 345 bull in there that I didn't actually kill. I found hanging up in there. And when I told my dad, I go, "Hey, hold these antlers up next to that one." And when he did that, I was like, "Oh, that's a nice bull." Like he's bigger than that. So then I knew I had a nice bull. And then when I rough scored him, he was like right on the dot, 350. That's a gross score. I mean, he would probably net 343, 344, somewhere in there.
It's awesome.
It's one of those like, he's got the frame of a book bull, but he's got those weak Idaho thirds, and that just kind of kills that book score. But and his firsts aren't extremely strong either. But
Beautiful fronts.
yeah, all four of his fronts are 17 and a half is the shortest, and 18 is the longest.
But he's just a big, old, thick, mature herd bull. It's beautiful, dude.
Yeah.
Like, beautiful public land bull.
Yeah,
The people I know, it's best public land bull I know of this year,
yeah.
So congrats, man. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Drew's good at archery, too. Like, we shot our bows all year, and the first couple times I shot with you, it was probably like me, you, and Dan shot. And I just thought you shot well. I was like, yeah, you just had a good day or whatever.
Yeah.
But then he's like, he stacks up good day after good day after good day. And then we finally shoot indoor, and you're like, with a hunting bow, you're creeping towards 300. I'm like, Jesus, dude, you're good at shooting your bow, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that I don't, I never. It just came natural to me.
Archery's one of the things that did come natural.
Yeah, I never took any formal training or anything on archery. I started out with traditional. You guys know that.
Yeah.
But I read a lot of books on traditional archery and how to shoot instinctive, and I don't know how much that plays into my success with shooting a compound, but it's kind of a thing where I'm not like athletic or super good at most other things. As you know, play pickleball, I'm super average at that, but and I was super average in high school sports. So, and I never knew I was better than average at archery either until I started shooting with a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it's just I don't know. I guess I'm calm behind the trigger. I'm a pretty decent rifle shot too. I don't know. It's just that when you watch, I think what I would attribute it to is when you watch people shoot, you see everybody floating around, and you see the movement in their bow, and they're at full draw, and they're making their shot. And for some reason, I don't know why, I just seem to be pretty steady.
Yeah, you got a still bow for sure.
Yeah.
You can see that with guys who shoot really well. Josh is a good example. Like, you can just see when how they draw their bow and then how it floats. You can be like, oh wow, dude, like I wouldn't want to bet with that guy. Like, there's just something to it. I've seen enough good shooters shoot now. I can basically watch a line of people shoot, and I'm like, oh, that guy really's got it going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, your shoulder positioning is good and stuff, and yeah, maybe that did come naturally to you, but yeah, your bow is definitely very stable.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, well, how about like the backcountry meals and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're making your dehydrated
Yeah,
food.
dude, this has been
Kind of years coming, right?
yeah, and it was like by far the best eating I've ever done in the backcountry. Holy cow, all those homemade meals.
Well, and for reference,
Just
the only
hit the spot.
things I've ever really seen you get excited about, other than like hunting, is food.
Yeah. Yeah. And those two play together, right?
Yeah, they do.
So
They do.
I think my favorite meal I had all season was this meal I made where I take all these Italian sausage links, fry them up, and then slice them pretty thin and mix it in a marinara sauce and just let it like cook all day. And then, throw it in the freeze dryer. And I wasn't really expecting that one to be my favorite one, but damn, dude, the first night I popped that thing open, and started digging into it. It was like, holy cow, I'm eating gourmet back here, man. But all of them were good. I even had some, I think my second favorite one was my niece had a graduation party in, I don't know, July or something. And my parents catered our good friend's Mexican food. And there was a ton of leftovers. And my mom's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with all these leftovers. I was like, I know what we're going to do with them.
I know, guy.
I know exactly what I'm going to do with this.
So I took all the taco meat and just a little bit of rice, and then mix in guacamole and pico de gallo. Threw them in the freeze dryer, and I knew they were going to be pretty good because when I pulled them out of the freeze dryer, you taste test a little bit. I was like, oh, I think that's going to be a good one. But then when I heated that one up with water in the backcountry, I was like, oh yeah, dude, this one's money too.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a bad one.
So I got a little handful of those. I'm going to sample on my next hunt, and I'll be able to kind of report on some of them.
Did I give you one of the Italian sausage ones?
I'm not sure. I know I
think
have a handful.
I
of
hope
them.
I did because
Yeah.
you're gonna like that one.
Yeah.
What did it take you to get set up to be able to do that yourself?
Yeah. What's the process? Kind of
Yeah.
the
What does the guy need
yeah.
if he's going to commit to that?
Basically, all you need is the freeze dryer. Everything else is something that a guy's already gonna have.
Freeze dry, and then you got to order the packages that you.
Yeah, you get I think you get like 50 of those Mylar bags when you buy it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you're set up for a good little while, anyways. Just buying the machine.
What did it run you?
I bought the medium sized one, and it was like $3,400, I think.
3,400.
To freeze dry,
Yeah,
and the dehydrator is the other option, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And what do you know the difference, pros and cons, freeze dry versus dehydrate?
There's a lot of stuff with the dehydrator I don't think you could do that you could put in the freeze dryer. I don't think it would. It's not going to rehydrate. Dehydrated food doesn't rehydrate like freeze dried food. So a dehydrator, you're going to want to put things in it that you're just going to eat that way. You're just going to eat it dehydrated,
like fruit and stuff.
Yeah.
You dry it out.
yeah. But even that same stuff in a freeze dryer is still better if you're going to eat it dry like that, like just freeze dried fruit snacks and all that kind of stuff is.
Yeah, because it rehydrates itself. when you put water in.
I mean eating it dry though, just crunch,
Oh, yeah.
like, eating it crunchy. Yeah, kiwis are delicious.
Yeah.
Strawberries, blueberries, cherries. I learned the.
I ate a whole bag of those.
Yeah, the cherries I kind of screwed up on because when you can take those Mylar bags, and if you have a vacuum sealer, you can vacuum seal the food, and you don't need to use one of those little oxygen absorbers packets. So I was freeze drying a lot of that stuff, and I gave you one of those bags of cherries that were vacuum packed. And I didn't know. It's just trial and error stuff. You have to learn the hard way. The cherries have enough sugar content in them that when you vacuum seal them, the whole thing just clumped together, and it turned into this rock hard lump of freeze dried cherries. So, next time around when I do the cherries, I'll just put an oxygen absorber in them, seal the bag without vacuum sealing it.
Yeah.
And the freeze dryer also comes with a bag sealer too, so you don't have to buy. I mean, it comes. You buy the freeze dryer; it comes with everything you need. Basically, you don't have to go buy a bag sealer or any of that crap.
And what do the bags cost? Do you recall?
Yeah, I think for about $25 you can get a pack of 50, and that's their brand. If you get online and search for Mylar bags, you could probably find them even cheaper.
Gotcha.
But 50 cents a bag. That's no big deal.
It's nothing.
Yeah, I'm mentally going through the checklist.
Sure.
Okay, here's how much a bag of freeze dried food costs.
Yeah.
Like, 10, 12, $13, depending on what kind.
Yeah.
Right. Or I think Mountain House is like $9, and then Peak's like
$9 to $15.
13.
Yeah, so
around there.
the cost savings of making my own freeze dried food versus buying like Mountain House and all that was never a factor for me. For me, it was always about the quality of the food.
Yeah.
So I've never actually penciled out what these meals are costing me. I don't know how much money I'm saving. And if you throw your time in,
No.
I don't know if you're saving a whole lot.
It's more like
Now,
a labor of love.
But I will say this about the freeze drying: it's not super time intensive. I mean, yeah, you got to take the food out, throw it in there, and you got to pull it out and package it all when it's done. But it's basically set it and forget it. So it's really not time intensive at all.
Just the making the meals, because you're kind of pre-making the meals and then freeze drying.
Yeah, and if you're planning ahead for next season, that's not, you don't have to like set time aside to make meals just for backpack hunting. We have a big family. We always make a ton of food. There's always leftovers.
Yeah, I was
Just
just
take the
thinking you could just
leftovers
take the
and throw 'em in the
leftovers and
freeze
throw it in the
dryer.
freeze dryer.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, that's stuff that nine times out of 10, does anybody ever end up eating it? Does it sit in the fridge for 3 or 4 days and then get tossed?
Right.
That kind of thing. I mean, that would be a huge savings in itself. But
Yeah.
I mean, just the cost of the freeze dryer alone, you got to do like, 350 meals, not counting the cost of the meal that you make to
Right.
pay for that. But I mean, if it's something that you're going to use the rest of your life,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you eventually you would come out
Yeah.
cheaper.
Yeah.
Well, and it's nice
It
to
just might take 700 or 800 meals or something by the time you got there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would agree with the quality of what you're
Oh, yeah.
eating versus, it's there. Some freeze dried food out there is better than others.
Yeah.
But I was under the impression it can be done a lot better. Like I think
Yeah.
Mark Levisay freeze dried all his own food.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, and I remember driving back from Eugene with him a year ago or whatnot. He talked about it a lot and was like, it's incredible. He's like, dude, freeze dry a peach.
Oh, yeah. I haven't done
Like,
those.
oh,
That
God.
does sound good. I've done or my mother-in-law does dehydrated peaches, and those are tasty.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing that I like better about freeze drying than dehydrating is, say dehydrating a peach, you're going to cut its weight from a fresh peach to a dehydrated peach probably in half or maybe a third. Well, you're going to make it cut it in half as much more freeze drying it.
Yeah.
Freeze drying
you're
is
packing less
even
weight.
lighter still than
Yeah.
dehydrating.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Well, give Drew the kind of the scope of the overview of what we did the other day, shooting our little heavy arrow versus medium arrow versus light arrow, not light or whatever. 400 versus 600 versus 800 grain arrow.
Well, Tim called me a day before we did it or the day of doing it or something and said, hey, I want to do a 400 grain arrow, 600 grain arrow, and 800 grain arrow and actually measure this stuff. And I was like, well, you can do it right or you can do it the way it's been done before. And he's like, well, you can do it like picky and whatnot. I was like, no, this won't be hard to do right. Just we got to add a little bit to what we're doing. And he came out, we built an arrow each, and we figured out where the zero was on the 400 grain arrow, the 600 grain arrow, the 800 grain arrow, and then moved out to 60 yards and figured out where the drop point was for distance on the 400 grain arrow, and then got a caliper out and measured that,
Yeah.
and then went through and readjusted at 60 yards where your 20-yard pin would have been on the 600 grain, and then moved it down that far, same drop, and shot it, and then did the same thing with an 800 grain, moved that out to that yardage, used the gap, shot it again. And there was a 23 inches or 21 inches?
Yeah, like 2 feet.
Around 2 feet on the 600, and it was over 4 feet on the 800.
At 60 yards?
Yeah.
What are we shooting it out of?
His VTM, so like a
VTM.
70, low 70s poundage, 29 and at 29 and a half
It basically
inch bow,
shoots a
fast bow.
450 grain arrow at 300 feet per second even.
And then the velocity,
Pretty fast bow.
the velocity drop from 400 to 600 speed wise was, because we cornered it too. So you could see how fast each arrow was.
It dropped
Yeah.
about 50
Yeah.
feet per second.
It dropped 50 feet a second on the first one, and then another 30 or 40 or 25, something like that on the second
30,
one.
about 30, yeah.
Yeah, it was about 30. So you lost 80 feet on an 800 grain.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty massive. But
And you said 2 feet of drop from the
2 foot.
that
at
was
60
from
yards.
the 450 to the
No, 400 to
400
600.
to the
We did
600?
even 200 grains each.
the 2 feet was from the 400 to the 600.
Yeah, and
at
then
60.
an additional more than 2 feet on the 800. So it was over 4 feet from a 400 to an 800 of drop at 60 yards.
That blows me away. Out of a 70-pound, 30-inch draw,
Fast bow. 29.
29.
29.
Still fast. I mean, 300 grain or 300 foot per second bow. That
fast.
bow's efficient. And then the last thing we tested, which was what he wanted to do, is put water jugs,
We hit the
gallon
penetration
jugs,
station.
the penetration tests, right?
Yeah.
And line up 10 jugs in an effort to make sure you didn't go all the way through all of them. And he shot the first 400 grainer and went through 8 jugs and poked the tip into the 9th one. Is that right? 8? Yeah. And then shot the 600 grain arrow with new jugs, and it moved a quarter inch deeper. And then shot the 800 grain arrow, and it did the exact same thing as the 600 grain arrow.
Yeah, it was.
And these are the
interesting.
same diameter arrows, same
Right.
diameter shape field. So they all had like a 5/16 field point on it. Because the points I had to put on
a
the
field
800 grain
point.
arrow,
Shooting a
field
field
point,
point.
no broadheads,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
field
yeah.
points. But we are talking equal dimension drag here.
From
Right?
about what 3
Right.
4 yards?
Yeah, from 3 yards.
3 yards.
It
Yeah.
was 3 yards just to make sure that we hit the jugs in the right spot, so it would not like deviate off of a jug.
Right.
Right. And yeah, there was basically zero difference in how far they went in.
I would be interested to see that exact same test. Don't change a single thing except for the distance from where the arrow makes impact from where you stand to shoot. And the reason why I would like to see that difference is because when your arrow comes out of the bow, as you know, it's doing its maximum amount of flexing,
Yep.
right?
Sure.
And that flexing doesn't stop. The arrow doesn't straighten until between 15 and 20 yards. Would you agree?
It depends on how stiff the arrow is
Yeah.
and how much weight you're putting in front of the arrow because that'll make it harder.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, I'd say in general it's probably done flexing by 15 yards, which is why they tell you to shaft tune at 16 yards
Yeah.
because it's done flexing and then that's its first reaction of where it's going to go.
Right, right. So yeah, that would be the only thing I would want to see is if that changed if you moved out to 16 to 20 yards.
Well, and I think that the heavier arrow does carry more momentum downrange, right?
Yeah.
But in what we did, it's pretty surprising, right? That it didn't change. I was really guessing.
So here's the funnier question though.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that that heavier arrow does carry more momentum downrange, how come it dropped by a ratio greater at 60 yards?
Which is also interesting.
That doesn't make any sense. That
Because
shouldn't
the
happen.
ratio, like, even though the feet per second was closer, it dropped more.
Yeah, which was weird. I thought that was very odd. But so like I said, the first one was like 2 feet, and the second one was beyond 4 feet. It was like 4.5.
And the
feet.
drop from the first arrow to the second arrow in feet per second was 50, and the
these
drop
are
to the third was 30 feet per
And
second.
these are the exact same diameter shaft, like
Yeah.
exact same.
Did you make that measurement, the drop measurement? Was that drop point from zeroed on the 400?
Yes.
Yes, we re-zeroed each one, started the 20-yard setting on a 600 grain arrow where it was hitting at 20 yards, and then gave the drop of the 400 grain arrow to the 600 grain arrow. So like, let's say it moved, for easy math, let's say it dropped an inch on the sight tape, right? We went to where a 600 grain arrow would impact at 20 yards and then dropped it an inch and shot it.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
So we went apples to apples on the drop.
Yeah, we didn't just say, okay, here's 20 with a 400 grain arrow. Now shoot a 600 grain arrow at 60 yards. Because that's anytime I'd ever seen one of those tests, that was the number one gripe I would see. It's like, well, you didn't re-zero the bow. And it was very accurately different.
Yeah.
Like it was 15 yards, 30 yards, and 40 yards on his tape
Right.
for each one.
So
But we took that into account. We moved it to 40 yards,
Right.
then measured and added the inch or whatever number you want to give it. We just held a caliper up to it
Right.
for the previous, and that's where it impacted.
Yeah, because like you said, with the heavier arrow, the drop is supposed to be less. I'm trying to think of the terms.
It's supposed to bleed energy slower.
Yeah.
And thus by bleeding energy slower, it shouldn't drop as much as you move your way out.
Right. Right.
But that didn't happen.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, there's ways you could make it more scientific or whatever, but just from kind of a baseline, we did a good job controlling what we could control in those tests. And there's layers you could go in more, but like, isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Kind of contradicted what a lot of people think,
Right.
which
Now, if you were to be like,
felt great.
if you were to, if you were to be like devil's advocate and you're like, okay, water jugs weren't the best impact test, what would be a better impact test
Yeah, that's a good question.
as a control? Right? Because that fluid is kind of similar to a cavity.
Either way.
Yeah.
Either way. Well, so I've always made the argument that it's not actually the weight of the arrow. It's the spine of the arrow, adequate spine, adequate tune, and then the type of broadhead you put on it. That's my belief structure. Like
Yeah.
I think you would have had the same or very similar results on your elk with a 400 grain arrow if you had the same broadhead in it and the same adequate spine behind it and it was tuned. I think you'll run into the same result personally. And like it or not, what we tested showed that exactly to a T.
Yeah.
Is that it didn't go in any farther or like such a small, unrealistic difference that you couldn't call it different.
I do agree that the broadhead and the properly tuning of the arrow and the proper spine of the arrow are all more important factors than the final weight of the arrow. I do agree with you on that. Absolutely.
I think it's like a little icing on the cake to make a guy feel a little better personally when it comes as long as, because if we're talking about 250 spine arrow, just different GPI arrows, right?
Yeah.
I think it just makes a guy feel a little warmer and fuzzier. I don't think it's actually helping. And I'd make the argument a lot that the animal's reaction to your shot is probably going to play a bigger role than being able to, shoot through 2 elk with what you're trying to shoot with, right?
Right.
Than movement and reaction.
Time
to target is pretty drastic.
Yeah. I think the only thing, like I said, the only advantage that the 400 grain had over the other 2 arrows in that test is because it's tipped with a lighter head, it's going to have less of a flex at the distance you shot it into the jugs, because you were only 3-4 yards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That arrow's gonna flex less. What do you call the flex of the arrow? How do you, when you measure that?
How far it deviates from center?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just call it flex.
Okay. Well, at 3 or 4 yards, it's going to be considerably less on that 400 grain arrow than on that 800 grain arrow, right? So the only
Because the
difference I
800
would
grain arrow
say,
had more tip weight.
So
yeah.
I'll give you that, but here's a reasonable argument for you. The 600 grain arrow had almost the exact same tip weight in it. The 800 grain arrow had a lot more because it was the only way I could make it.
Yeah.
But the 600 grain arrow might have had 25 grains more in it. It wasn't much.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a big difference.
How did you gain that weight in that 600 grain
So the
arrow?
different
then if it
arrows-
I used
wasn't on
a
the tip?
heavier arrow.
Higher GPI arrow.
I used Axis dangerous games because they're stupid heavy. Like one of them's 15.5 and one of them's 17.3.
Right.
And those are the arrows we used. Now, the one that was 17.3, I had to put a bunch of more weight in the front.
Right.
And it was the stiffer one. It was a 250 instead of a 300. But the difference between the 400 grain arrow and the 600 grain arrow was minimal. And I could go through, if you really believe that heavily, I could calculate it out and find a way to make a 400 grain arrow that was equivalent to what you want to see in a 600 grain arrow. It wouldn't have been terribly hard to do, but he had arrows already that if we just put an 85 grain point in it, it weighed 400 grains.
Yeah.
So we went ahead and did that. But all 3 arrows had the same diameter of point in the front,
Right.
too. So that was fair. And we fletched them with the same fletchings and the same angle of twist
Yeah,
and everything. And they all had the same. Yeah, everything about them was the same,
Which
as
I
much as
think
you can do.
That was actually pretty important to do the same fletchings because those fletchings actually drag a lot more than I think
Yeah.
people give credit to.
Absolutely.
They drag a lot.
They drag a lot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
pretty interesting. Definitely other ways to do it, more ways to expand on it. But yeah, man, it's really it's kind of wild.
Yeah. I know that, you see more pass-throughs, and this is a little bit counterintuitive, but you see more pass-throughs on any type of arrow at that distance from 15 to 20 yards than you do under that, right? And there's only one factor that can contribute to that, and that's the flex of the arrow.
Okay, well, let me travel back to that one for a second. Name the shots where you see that are like inside of that. They're all frontals. How many times do you see a broadside shot at less than 20 yards on film?
Yeah, not that often.
No, but when you see those real close ones, they're frontals,
True.
right? And you're shooting through more mass
Right.
in a frontal,
Right.
right? So I don't know if that's necessarily fair. I've shot stuff at 5-6 yards broadside, blown right through it. So
Yeah.
I don't think that has as much of a factor as you think it does. It does. I'm not going to say it doesn't have any. It does have some for sure, but I don't think that it's doing what you think it's doing to that degree.
Right. Right.
But it would be something to look into for sure.
Yeah, it would be an interesting. And I'm not even saying that it would make that 600 or 800 grain arrow penetrate that much more, but it would be something I would love to see.
Sure. But think back on this for a second, right? What are the odds that we just magically happen to get them to all go to the same penetration with that factor?
Right. Right.
That can't, there's no way. Like one of them should have offset the other one indirectly if that makes a legit difference.
Yeah, you'd think there would be like more of a massive offset.
There had to have been offset somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? Because we have 3 different things at 3 different spines, and they still, I mean, they were really close, but not perfect because there's no way you're going to make an 800 grain arrow that's the right spine with a similar amount of front weight in it. You just can't do it. And to have them get within like a quarter of an inch or less of each other, when you're talking about it went through 40 inches.
Yeah.
And it landed within a quarter of an inch.
Yeah, the only argument I could think to make to support my stance on that would be they all penetrated the same because the 800 received more drag because of its flex, but because of its point weight, it was able to overcome that to match the penetration of the lighter arrow that had less flex, if that makes sense.
But how'd they end up exactly the same, dude?
I don't know. I don't know.
So my argument has always been if it's adequately spined, they're going to do about the same thing if they see the same amount of drag, i.e. you put the same broadhead on it, you fletch it with the same arrows, and you have roughly the same adequate spine. And that is exactly what that showed. Like it was like within 99.5%.
We didn't do like a pre-hypothesis, but what would your like pre-hypothesis have been? That they would be similar? Or
well, I've for the longest time before people really started talking about momentum a lot, I always tested kinetic energy on everything.
Yeah, everybody
right?
did, yeah.
And what first sparked my head going this direction in my probably late teens, early 20s, is I would make similar configurations of things and test the kinetic energy, and there was no difference. It was like a half a point. If you go from like a 400 grain arrow to an 800 grain arrow, and you run it into a kinetic energy calculation, it's like a 0.5%, maybe 1%, and you lose like 80 feet a second or 90 feet a second. And I'm like, why would I give up 30% of my speed for 1% of energy?
Right.
It didn't make sense in my head. So I'm like, this is stupid. I'm not doing that. And then people would make the momentum argument over and over and over. And traditionally, the person making the momentum argument shoots a broadhead designed for penetration. Like supreme penetration. Yeah. They don't shoot something that's not going to penetrate because that's their fixation.
Those go hand in hand.
And I would go back into that. Well, that's just your broadhead. That's not the weight of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because no one shoots a heavy arrow and like a big fat broadhead, right?
No. Nobody shoots an 800 grain arrow with a freaking rage on the front of it.
Right.
Nobody does that.
That's interesting.
Because they contradict each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how are you even going to build that arrow?
You're gonna do a really heavy insert,
right?
like my 100 grain steel, and then another 100 grains of weight
or
behind
you
it.
Be putting weight tubes in it or something.
Yeah, you can weight tube it, sure. Or shoot a dangerous game 250, 17.7 grains per inch. But even that arrow, we put the 100 grain insert in it and a 50 grain brass behind it and a 150 grain point because that's the heaviest point I had on the wall to work it out. I'm like doing math and cut it down going, okay, if I put that, and that in there, we hit the right number.
Yeah.
And it still just really kind of shocked me that there was almost no difference. I mean, like I said, 99.5%, right?
Yeah.
But it 100% is what I believe.
Yeah.
I believe if you could get the blade that's in that broadhead that you just shot that elk with, and make like a one-piece titanium insert thing in a RIP XV and a 250, because you're shooting a 250, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and glue that all together, you would have the exact same result.
Yeah.
I believe it hard, and one way or another, I'll prove it over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's not weight.
Definitely one notable difference, though, when you do go that light 4mm route is the arrows are less durable.
Yeah, no, that's always been the downside, and I will point that out. I was like, you're using a weaker arrow. It's not going to hold up to the same thing. Like you're going to shoot, it's going to go through whatever you shoot at, but if it's still in it,
Yep.
and it takes 4 steps, it's going to be snapped in half.
Yeah.
There's no way it's going to hold up. If you fall on your quiver, you're more likely to break an arrow.
Yeah.
But even the difference between like an XV and a TKO or the arrow you're shooting a rip, like in a TKO, it's only 9 an inch. You're 7.5 or something like that on a 250 XV. Or no, it's heavier than that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're only saving 20, 30 grains.
Which is why we always
Overall.
shoot rips. Yeah,
Rip.
pretty much, right?
Yeah, I mean, like in a TKO, they are, because your XV 250s are what GPI? Or not your XVs, your regular 250s are what GPI? Do you remember?
I think they're 8.7.
I think they're like low 9s.
I think they're low 9s.
Are
I think
they?
they're
TKO
actually heavier than a
TKOs
TKO.
are like
No.
8.8.
No, that was one of the reasons why I went with the rips instead of the TKOs.
No, rips
'cause
are a smidge heavier.
They're
They're
hang
not
on.
much.
Oh,
They're-
I can
they're
I can
equitable.
look it up. I can look it up.
Josh will look
Are
it
you
up.
sure?
I'll look it up.
Yeah.
I'll
It's
be
like-
I'll be young Jamie. Hang on.
It's like 8.8 and 9.1, but they're equitable. So it's like doesn't really
Yeah.
change much.
Yeah.
It's
But
not drastic.
They're equitable for a cheaper arrow. So that's, you know, why not?
Yeah, we're 100% in the same boat as far as that broadhead. Whatever you put on the front of that, that's the number one factor.
It's mucho.
100%. It's
mucho
huge.
importante.
Maybe the number 2 factor. I think a properly tuned arrow is probably number 1. Would you agree to
Yes.
that? Yeah, properly
Yes.
tuned number 1
9.3
is the rips.
is the rip, and I know that the TKO is 9 because
I think it's
the
8.8.
I had
no,
that
it's
backwards
not.
in my head.
It's 9 for a 250.
Oh,
It's
okay.
8.9 for a
That's right.
300, and it's 8.8 for a 350.
I had that backwards in my
Yeah,
head.
so what you're shooting is actually a heavier arrow, but they are drastically cheaper.
yeah,
They're
like
like
half price.
Like they're dang near half the price.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they come with a steel insert where
they still come
where
with
the
the
other
steel
ones
insert.
don't. So it's
the TKOs.
No, they come with a TL. Like
with
so,
that aluminum insert.
the number one complaint that Victory had for a while was that the end of the arrow would crack if you hit something hard, even with that steel insert that comes with those. That's why they sleeve over a little bit, so
Yeah.
it kind of hides it.
Yeah.
Well, the TL goes over half an inch, so it's like a collar,
Oh right. Oh
But-
yeah. I know which ones you're talking about.
but it's
Yeah.
aluminum.
Yeah.
The whole thing's aluminum.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah, I'm not a fan of those either.
and you can't get an all steel version of it. They
Right.
Yeah,
But
even
you
you
can
can get a steel internal, but the outside's still aluminum.
Yeah, but you can get the same insert. You can buy the same inserts that come standard with
Yeah.
the ribs, and that's what I used to
Yeah,
do.
well, they're slightly different because your a 250 regular rip is actually its own insert.
Is it
It only fits that arrow.
because the OD's a little different?
The OD is a little bigger.
Yeah.
But they're as you change diameter or spine, you change diameter a little bit in the rip
Yeah,
line.
Yeah,
Whereas in the TKOs, I want to say the 250, the 300, 350 all take the same size.
yeah,
The OD and ID are exactly the same on
Yeah.
all the three.
yeah.
of those
That was
arrows.
another reason why I switched from the TKOs to the regular ribs is because I would always buy the TKOs and then buy the steel inserts to go with them. So
Yeah,
was
see,
like,
I
oh,
said
I'll
you're
s-
cheap.
I'll save.
Remember? That's where it came
I'll
from.
save
I'm
even-
not shooting that because
Not only are the arrows
Now we're
cheaper, but
they
I'll
are.
save having to
They
buy the
are.
steel
They're,
insert.
And they
they're
look good.
drastically cheaper. Yeah.
And what?
And
And they look
good.
And they're
good.
they're
Yeah.
red. To
But
match.
they are drastically cheaper. I mean, if price is a factor at all, that makes a heck of a lot of sense.
I've never been as confident in a setup as I have been with this Bowtech. Man, that I just love that bow. It holds so nice in the hand, and it's the only Bowtech I've ever owned. I owned all Matthews bows before that, and I really liked the way the Halon 32 held in my hand. But I never felt as confident with the VXR or the what came after that.
VXR, and then it was V3, wasn't it?
Yeah, the V3.
Yeah,
the
V3,
I had
31
both
and
of those.
28.
And I mean, I liked those bows, but when I started shooting that Revolt X80, dude, I was like, this
Well-
is the bow for me.
Well, you are talking about a bow that has drastically less reflex, infinite tunability, good speed. You know, everything
Yeah.
about that bow is if you look at like how I test bows on my reviews and whatnot, it would win those categories.
Yeah.
It's not super heavy. It's the only thing it doesn't have is a exceptionally long riser for the axle to axle. It's got a little bit more of that forward limb slope that a target archer typically appeals to because it points a little better.
Yeah.
But it will have a slight bit more recoil because of it. But it's not drastic. That bow's still a great
Yeah,
bow.
I honestly have not felt.
If you shot it against like an SS34, you'd notice a vibration difference. It's
Yeah.
a little bit. But you don't, it's like you don't feel vibration until you feel something that has less vibration.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you go back and grab it and go, oh,
yeah.
okay.
But,
I get it.
one of Matthew's claims to fame is that dead in the hand feel. And I didn't notice any measurable difference in that feel with the Revolt X80 over my Matthews bows.
You typically won't because the amount of vibration difference between the two is so minimal.
Yeah.
Which is why I bought a vibration tool.
Oh, did you really?
Oh yeah. So you're putting a numeric number. It has like a 1032 screw in the side of it. So I screw it into a target sight and then bolt the target sight to the bow and then shoot it with
Okay, so it's attached to the sight.
It is attached to the sight. Now I could have it rethreaded and screw it into like the stabilizer bushing or something. And now if it becomes something that people really like to see, I will have a part made so it can mount somewhere else.
Yeah, I
But
would
for
like
now,
to
it's
see
like,
that
let's just bolt it on and
attached to the riser somewhere close to the handle.
Well, that would be the stabilizer bushing. So I'd just get a 1032 to 5/16 24 adapter, screw it into there, put it on. Yeah. I was trying to find a stabilizer that had the older weight size because they used to be 1/4-20, and that's what I thought it was. But then I went through and figured out it was 1032. So if I could, eventually I'll mount it that way. But since I started this year that way, it'll come out different. So every bow I test, I will test it that way. Next year, it'll probably be in the stabilizer bushing because that's probably a fairer way to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't want to give skewed numbers.
Right.
People.
Well, right.
Good stuff, guys.
She out.
Fire's out.
Boom.
Drew and I got to go shoot up a little round to Vegas.
Now we gave Drew a reason to think about a lighter arrow.
So good. Drew has been trending, though.
He's trending in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've said it before to you guys. I started when I came off my recurve, those arrows were like 900 and something. And so when I first got into compound, I was hovering still right at that 900. So I've dropped over 300 grains over the course of 5 years, 4 or 5 years.
Almost there.
So almost there. You say almost there. What would you?
425 to 475, Drew.
Well, that's not almost there. Shit, that's still 100 to 150 grains.
How heavy is your arrow right now?
575.
Yeah. So if you drop 100 off, you're right there.
For his broadhead style, though, it's hard for him to drop.
Well, now hold on. So there is a possible way to be continued.
TBC, you want to pimp out your business?
Howerton Electric.
Does it come? Does it
What do
come?
you mean? Do you want to pimp out? He's wearing the hat and the shirt when he walked in here. What
Does
do
it
you
come
mean
with your
pimp out?
guns?
Does it come with your guns?
Oh, dude, these are
2
I'm
tickets
not
to the gun show?
These are half size right
Half
now.
pie? Half pie
Depreciated.
on?
No upper body workouts at all in the month of September, and you can feel it when you throw the shirt on, and your sleeves are like fitting loose.
A little room in the
Oh,
sleeves.
got work to do.
Yeah.
PodiumArchery.com, discount code TimC. Save some money, ship some goods to your door. Let us know what you thought of the pod and subscribe. And let us know if you want to see Drew back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
See you later, guys.